My name is Clara Evans. I'm 79 years old now, living quietly in a small house near the edge of a sleepy town in Oregon. The kind of town where everyone knows everyone, and the streets are lined with old maple trees that stretch their branches like welcoming arms. I spend most of my days in my garden or sipping tea on the porch, listening to the creak of the rocking chair beneath me. To the folks who pass by, I'm just the elderly woman with silver hair and a gentle smile. They don't know the real story, the one that has lived inside me for all these years, slowly shaping who I've become. They don't know the heartbreak, the broken promise, or the moment that would forever change my life. You see, promises are powerful things. They hold weight. They make you believe in something bigger than yourself. But what happens when the person you trust with your heart breaks that promise? Do you let it break you, or do you find a way to rise above it? Before I tell you my story, I want you to think about that for a moment. If someone you trusted, someone who knew your dreams, betrayed you, what would you do? Would you collapse under the weight of it, or would you find the strength to stand tall again? I've lived through it all, and now, at this age, I'm ready to share the story that's been locked away for so long. But first, let me take you back to where it all began. It was 18 years ago, in a small town like this one, where I met the man who would change everything for me. His name was Henry Mason. He wasn't like the other teachers at Willowbrook High School. He was quiet, thoughtful, and carried himself with a calm that made you listen when he spoke. He wore simple suits that always looked a bit worn, and there was a soft, comforting smell about him, something like old books and fresh linen. I was a shy, awkward girl from a struggling family. My father worked long hours as a mechanic, fixing everything that came through the shop, while my mother cleaned houses for extra money. I had big dreams, dreams of escaping this town, going to college, seeing the world, but I didn't know how to make any of it happen. Then came Henry Mason. He saw something in me no one else did. One day after class, when everyone else had gone home, I stayed behind to clean the chalkboards. Henry approached me quietly and said, "Clara, I've been watching you. You're special, you know that?" At first, I thought he was just being kind, like teachers sometimes are to the quiet kids. But there was something in his voice, something that made me believe him. From that day on, he took a special interest in me. He gave me books to read outside of class, and he would often stay after school to talk to me about the world beyond Willowbrook. His words made me believe I could do more than just escape. I could be someone who mattered. Then one evening, something changed everything. It was late, and the sky was tinged with orange as the sun set behind the hills. I was walking home from the library when I heard Henry's voice behind me. "Clara," he called out. I stopped, and when I turned around, he was standing there, looking a little nervous, his hands tucked into his pockets. "I've been meaning to tell you something," he said, his voice a little shaky. "What is it?" I asked, my heart beating a little faster. He paused, as if thinking carefully about his words. "When you're older, when the time is right, I want to marry you," he said. I stood there frozen. "What?" I whispered. "Yes," he said, his gaze steady. "You're meant for great things, Clara, and when you're ready, I'll come back for you." I didn't know what to think. At 18, I believed him. I believed every word. That night, I couldn't sleep. I imagined a future with him, one where I wasn't just the quiet girl from Willowbrook, but someone chosen, someone loved. Years passed. I worked hard, took scholarships, and eventually left Willowbrook for college. Every holiday I came back, hoping to see him again. But when I did, he was always busy, always distant. And then, when I was 24, I heard something that made my heart stop. Henry Mason was getting married, not to me, but to someone else. Someone from a wealthy family, someone who didn't have to wait for promises. I stood outside the newspaper office that day, my hands trembling as I held the paper. There, in black and white, was the news of his wedding, and my name was nowhere in his future. The promise he made to me was nothing but a broken dream. That was the day I realized something painful. Promises are easy to make when you never intend to keep them. I didn't cry. Not then, anyway. Instead, something inside me went silent, cold, and in that silence, I made a choice. A quiet one. A choice that would change him in a way he never expected. I didn't act immediately. I waited. I grew stronger. I learned. Some victories take years, and when the time was right, he would finally understand what it means to lose someone you thought would always be there. So, I ask you again, what would you do? Would you forgive the person who broke your heart, or would you rise, quietly but powerfully, to claim the future that was rightfully yours? The next time I saw Henry Mason, he was standing at my front door, with regret in his eyes, and what he didn't know is that everything had changed. If you want to know what happened next, stay with me, because my story, like the truth, is about to unfold in ways no one expected. It had been years since I last thought about Henry Mason. Life had moved on, and so had I, in my own way. I had made a life for myself, a quiet life. I taught English at a local community college, and my little house by the edge of town had become my sanctuary. The years had given me a sense of peace, a comfort in knowing who I was, even if it wasn't the life I had imagined all those years ago. But then came the knock on my door. It was a cool autumn morning when I heard it, the soft tap, 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 almost hesitant, like someone unsure if they should even be there. My heart skipped a beat, a flutter of nerves I hadn't expected. I hadn't thought about Henry in years, not really, not since I had moved on, left behind the version of myself that believed in fairy tales. When I opened the door, there he stood. I almost didn't recognize him at first. The man standing before me wasn't the confident teacher I remembered. His hair, once dark and thick, had turned gray, and his posture, once so proud, had become slouched, weighed down by time. He was older, thinner, and looked as though life had carved deep lines into him. But his eyes were still the same, that same familiar brown that had once made my heart race. "Clara," he said, his voice soft, almost broken. I stood there for a moment, just staring at him, unsure of what to say. So much time had passed, so many years, and yet here he was, standing in front of me as though he had never left. The man who had made a promise, the man who had shattered my world. "Henry," I whispered, unable to say anything else. He took a deep breath, his hand shaking slightly. "I didn't know where else to go," he said quietly. "I heard you were back in town. I've been thinking about you for a long time." I stepped aside, motioning for him to come in. I couldn't explain why, but I couldn't bring myself to turn him away either. The years had changed me. I wasn't the same girl who had once waited for him to return. I had become someone else, someone stronger. But there was still a part of me, a small, fragile part, that remembered the promise. Henry stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room like he was walking through a memory. The same old furniture, the faded photographs on the walls, the worn carpet that had seen decades of life. He looked at it all, and for a moment I wondered if he was remembering the way things had once been, before the promises were broken. "You've done well for yourself," he said, his voice almost wistful. I didn't respond. There was no need to. The years had passed, and I had learned to live without him. I had learned to be enough on my own. "Why are you here, Henry?" I finally asked, breaking the silence that had settled between us. He sat down on the couch, rubbing his hands nervously. "I heard you never married," he said, his voice quieter now. I felt a sharp sting in my chest. "And what if I had?" I replied, not looking at him. "What if I had moved on like you did?" He looked down at his hands as though ashamed. "I made a mistake, Clara," he said slowly. The words hung in the air, heavy with regret. I didn't speak. I just waited, letting him continue. "I thought marrying Eleanor was the right thing," he explained. "Her family had money, connections. They were respected. I thought it was the smart decision, the safe decision. I was afraid of being poor forever, afraid of choosing love over security." I let his words wash over me, feeling a strange calm settle within me. I had expected him to say something like this. I had expected him to try to justify his choices, his decisions. But hearing it from his mouth, hearing him admit it, didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. I listened to everyone around me. I thought I was doing the adult thing. But I was wrong, Clara. I was wrong. For a moment, I said nothing. I just sat there, watching him. I had waited so long for him to come back, but now that he was here, standing in front of me, I realized something. I no longer needed him to apologize. I had already moved on, in my own way. I had built a life without him, a life I could be proud of. "You came back because you regret it," I said finally, my voice calm. "But you didn't come back because you love me. You came back because you're lonely." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. "I don't want your apology, Henry," I said softly. "I've waited long enough for you to realize what you lost, but I'm done waiting. I'm done living in a story where you are the hero and I am the victim." He looked up at me then, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and something else, something softer, more vulnerable. "Clara, I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant to break my promise. I just didn't know how to fix it." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The words he said didn't change the past, didn't change the years I had spent waiting for him to come back. What I had learned over the years was this: waiting for someone else to fix your life was a mistake, and Henry had made that mistake too. "You've hurt me enough," I said quietly, "and now it's time for you to understand what it feels like to lose someone you thought you would always have." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "Clara, what do you want from me?" he asked, his voice full of uncertainty. I smiled, but it wasn't a smile of affection. It was a smile of resolution. "What I want, Henry," I said softly, "is for you to prove something." His eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "If you really want another chance," I said, "you'll have to prove it to me. You'll have to show me that you've learned something from all of this." He nodded slowly, his face turning pale. "Anything, Clara. Just tell me what to do." I stood up, walking slowly toward the window. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden light across the room. I turned to face him, my voice steady. "What I want, Henry, is for you to show me that you understand what it means to lose someone, not just any someone, me, the girl you promised to marry, the girl you left behind." Henry didn't say anything. He just sat there, his face pale, his hands clenched in his lap. "I'm done waiting for you to change, Henry," I said, my voice strong now. "If you really want another chance, you'll have to prove it in a way that will change everything. but it's not going to be easy." His gaze never left me as I spoke, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of control, not over him, but over my own life. I had taken back the power, and I wasn't going to give it away again. The next morning, I woke up early. The house was still and quiet, the way it always was when the world was just beginning to stir. I went through my morning routine like I always did, quietly, methodically. But today was different. Today, Henry's words from the night before hung in the air like smoke. He had promised me he would prove something, but I wasn't sure what that something was. I sat at my kitchen table, my coffee cooling in front of me, staring out the window. My mind replayed his face when I told him what I needed from him. I could see the doubt in his eyes, the hesitation. He wasn't sure what I meant, but that was the point. I wasn't going to make it easy for him. He had to learn what it really meant to lose someone, what it meant to lose me. I wasn't expecting a grand gesture, and I didn't want one. No, I wanted something deeper. I wanted him to understand the weight of the promise he had broken, the lives he had affected by his choices. For so many years, I had been the one carrying the burden of that broken promise. It was time for him to carry it. As I sat there thinking, I heard a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't sure what I expected, but I knew it was him. Henry had said he would come back. I didn't know how or when, but I had a feeling that the time was now. I walked slowly to the door, taking a deep breath before I opened it. There he stood, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. The sight of him, standing there with the same look in his eyes, nervous, uncertain, took me by surprise. It was as if he had stepped out of the past, the same man I had known when I was young, but different, older, wiser maybe, but still the man who had left me behind all those years ago. "I'm here," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded and stepped aside, allowing him to enter. He looked around, taking in the familiar surroundings, the same house he had once visited, the same room where we had spent so many hours talking about dreams and promises. The air between us felt thick, but there was no turning back now. He sat down at the kitchen table across from me, the same table where we had shared so many conversations in the past. "I've been thinking about what you said," he started, his voice low. "I want to prove something to you, Clara. I'm ready, but I need you to tell me exactly what you want." I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him, studying his face. I had no idea what he expected me to say, but I knew one thing for sure. This was not going to be easy for him. "I want you to show me that you understand what you did to me," I said slowly, carefully choosing my words. "I want you to prove that you understand the consequences of your choices. You can't just come back and expect everything to be the same. You have to earn it, Henry. You have to show me that you've learned." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine for answers. "What do you want me to do?" he asked again, his voice barely audible. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street. The wind was picking up, the leaves swirling in the air. "I want you to show me that you've learned the true meaning of a promise. A promise isn't something you make lightly. It's a commitment, a bond. And when you break it, you hurt someone. You hurt me. And I need you to feel that. I need you to understand what it means to have someone's trust and break it." I turned to face him, my eyes steady. "You've spent so many years running away from your mistakes. It's time for you to face them. It's time for you to stand up and take responsibility." He sat there, his face pale, his eyes wide. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just stared at me as if trying to find the words. Finally, he stood up, his hand shaking slightly. "What do you want me to do, Clara? Tell me. I'll do anything." I took a deep breath, letting the silence settle between us. This was the moment. This was the test. "If you really want to prove something," I said firmly, "you're going to have to stand in front of the people you once lied to. You're going to have to face the town, the people you once tried to impress, and admit that you made a mistake. You'll tell them the truth about me, about us, about everything." His eyes widened in shock. "What? You want me to tell the whole town? You want me to admit everything?" "Yes," I said, my voice unwavering. "You'll tell them the truth, and you'll do it in front of everyone. No excuses, no more hiding. You'll show them that you are capable of facing the consequences of your actions. Only then will I know that you understand what you did." Henry sat there for a long moment, his face a mixture of fear and disbelief. "I don't know if I can do that, Clara," he said, his voice cracking. "I've spent my whole life building a reputation. I don't know if I can tear it down." "You've already torn it down," I said, my voice soft but firm. "Your actions have already destroyed the image you've worked so hard to create. Now it's time to face the truth." He stood still for a moment longer, his hands clenched at his sides. Then, with a slow, defeated nod, he spoke. "I'll do it. I'll do whatever it takes." I gave him a small smile, the kind of smile that wasn't meant to be comforting, but rather a reminder of the power I now held. "Good. Then we'll see if you truly understand the weight of your promises." As Henry left my house that day, I knew that this was just the beginning of his journey towards redemption if he was brave enough to take it. I had no illusions that everything would be fixed with one confession, but I also knew that this was the first step, a long time coming. And as I sat there alone in the quiet of my house, I realized something else. The victory wasn't in making him regret his choices. The victory was in me finally taking control of my story. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone, not even Henry, take that away from me again. The days after I spoke to Henry felt like a strange kind of waiting. The air seemed heavier, as though the universe was holding its breath, waiting for something to change. It was no longer just about me and Henry. It was about the truth. It was about the people who would hear it, and it was about the consequences that would follow. I didn't know when he would come back. I didn't know if he would find the courage to do what I asked, but as I went about my daily life, teaching, taking care of my small house, tending to my garden, there was a constant presence in the back of my mind, the truth that had been hidden for so long. It wasn't easy. Sometimes I found myself staring out the window, thinking about the past, the girl I used to be, waiting for Henry to return. I had carried the weight of that broken promise for so long, it had become a part of me. But now I was no longer waiting. Now I was the one who held the power. One afternoon, nearly a week after our conversation, I heard the familiar knock on my door again. My heart skipped, but I didn't rush to answer. I had been preparing for this moment, but there was still a strange mixture of emotions swirling within me. The old Clara, the one who had once dreamed of Henry's return, wanted to run and hide, but the new Clara, the woman I had become, stood firm. I opened the door slowly, and there he was again, standing on my doorstep again. This time, there was no bouquet of wildflowers. He was empty-handed, his face solemn and drawn. His once confident posture had completely disappeared. He was smaller now, smaller in a way that made me realize just how much life had stripped him of his arrogance, his pride. "I'm ready," he said, his voice low, but with a note of determination. "I'll do what you asked. I'll face them. I'll tell the truth. But I need you to be there with me." I didn't reply immediately. I just looked at him. I could see the fear in his eyes, fear of the unknown, fear of how people would react. It wasn't just about the town. It was about him, and it was about me, too. I stepped aside and motioned for him to come in. We sat down at the kitchen table once again, the same table where we had shared our last conversation. The air between us felt thick, like a storm was gathering. "You understand what this means, right?" I asked, breaking the silence. "This isn't just about you standing in front of the town and admitting you made a mistake. This is about facing your past, your choices. It's about being vulnerable. It's about telling people the truth about who you really are." He nodded slowly, his hands clasped tightly together. "I know. I know I can't undo the past. I can't change what I did to you, but I can tell the truth now. I can face the people I once tried to impress and let them know who I really am." I looked at him for a long moment. "It's not going to be easy," I said, "and I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me. I'm doing it because I need to reclaim my story. I need to let the world know what happened, not just for you, but for me." He looked down at his hands. "I understand," he whispered. "I'll do it. For you." The day arrived. The hall in Willowbrook, where the town gatherings were held, hadn't changed much over the years. It still smelled like old wood, and the faded curtains hung loosely by the windows, as if holding on to memories that no one had bothered to revisit. But today, everything felt different. The air was charged with something I couldn't quite explain, a tension that made my stomach tighten and my heart beat faster. I wasn't nervous exactly, but there was something unsettling about facing the town, about facing the people who had once seen me as the quiet, invisible girl who came from a poor family. Now, I wasn't that girl anymore. Now, I had a voice, and it was time for the world to hear it. Henry and I arrived early, and as we stood at the back of the room, I could feel the eyes of the town on us. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd as people took their seats, trying to figure out what was going on. They didn't know yet. They didn't know why they were all gathered here. They thought it was just another small-town event. But today was different. The mayor stepped onto the stage and spoke in his usual warm, welcoming tone. "Thank you all for coming. Tonight we have the honor of hearing from one of our own, Clara Evans. She has something important to share with us." I stood up then, my legs feeling heavy beneath me. My heart pounded in my chest, but I walked to the front of the room with my head held high. I wasn't going to let fear control me anymore. This was my moment. I took the microphone from the stand and looked out at the crowd. The faces of my neighbors, some of whom I had known my whole life, stared back at me. I could feel the weight of their gaze, but I didn't falter. I had a story to tell, and it was time to share it. "My name is Clara Evans," I began, my voice steady, "and I've lived in this town most of my life. Some of you know me as the quiet girl from the farm. Others know me as the woman who never married. But tonight, I want to tell you something you've never heard before." The room fell silent. Even Henry, standing in the front row, was still. I could feel his gaze on me, but I didn't look at him. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about me. I was 18 when I met Henry Mason. He was my teacher. He told me I was special. He promised me that one day, when the time was right, he would marry me. I paused, letting the words settle. I could hear the gasps from the crowd. I glanced at Henry, who was now sitting with his head bowed, his hands shaking slightly. He looked as though he was preparing for the worst. "I waited for years," I said. I believed him. I built my life around that promise. But as many of you know, Henry didn't keep that promise. He married someone else, someone who came from a wealthier family. I could feel the anger rising within me, but I held it back. This wasn't the time for anger. This was the time for truth. "Henry chose comfort over love," I said softly. "He chose security over the woman who believed in him. He broke his promise, and I was left to pick up the pieces of my life." There was a long pause. The room was still. The crowd was stunned. But then Henry stood up. He walked to the stage slowly and took the microphone from my hand. "Henry never meant to hurt you, Clara," he said, his voice shaking. "I was afraid of losing everything I had built, afraid of what people would think, and I made the wrong choice." The room was silent. No one spoke, no one moved. They were all waiting for something, waiting for the next part of the story to unfold. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just about Henry. This wasn't just about the past. This was about me taking back my life, taking back my story. And from this moment on, I would never be silent again. The air in the room felt heavy as Henry stood beside me, his words still hanging in the silence. He had confessed, but the truth was only beginning to unravel. The town had heard part of it, but there was so much more to tell. This wasn't just about a broken promise. It was about everything that had led to that moment. The years of waiting, the years of silence, the years I spent believing in something that had never been true. I stood there, feeling the weight of their gazes on me. The crowd was still, their faces a mixture of surprise, shock, and confusion. Some of them were old neighbors, people I had known since childhood. Others were strangers, new families who had moved to Willowbrook over the years. They didn't know me the way the others did. They didn't know the girl who had once dreamed of a future with Henry. But now they were seeing me in a new light. The truth had a way of doing that. It didn't just change the story, it changed the way people saw you. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of how they saw me. I had lived my whole life hiding in the shadows, waiting for a man who would never come back for me. Then now, I was standing in front of them, telling my story, and I wasn't going to let anyone silence me again. Henry took a step back, his eyes still on the floor. He had said his piece, but I could tell he wasn't done. He wasn't done trying to fix the mess he had created. And maybe, just maybe, that was the hardest part for him, the realization that he couldn't just sweep everything under the rug anymore. The truth was out, and there was no going back. But I wasn't here for his redemption. I wasn't here to give him another chance. I was here to reclaim my life, to reclaim my story. "I never wanted to hurt you, Clara," he said again, his voice quiet, almost pleading. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting you. But I see now that I was wrong. I should have chosen you. I should have fought for us." I felt a strange calm wash over me. I had spent so many years wishing for this moment, wishing for Henry to come back and make everything right. But now that he was here, I realized something important. The moment I had been waiting for wasn't going to change anything. It wasn't going to take away the years of pain, the years of heartache, the years of being alone. "I don't need you to fix anything," I said softly, looking at him with clear eyes. "I don't need you to make it right. What I need is for you to understand the truth about what you did to me, the truth about what I lost because of your choices." Henry looked up at me then, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and guilt. "I know," he whispered. "I know." I could feel the crowd behind me, their eyes still on us, waiting for more, waiting for what would happen next. But I wasn't ready to give them that, not yet. Instead, I turned back to Henry, my voice steady. "I never wanted to hurt you, Clara," he said again, his voice quiet, almost pleading. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting you. But I see now that I was wrong. I should have chosen you. I should have fought for us." I felt a strange calm wash over me. I had spent so many years wishing for this moment, wishing for Henry to come back and make everything right. But now that he was here, I realized something important. The moment I had been waiting for wasn't going to change anything. It wasn't going to take away the years of pain, the years of heartache, the years of being alone. "I don't need you to fix anything," I said softly, looking at him with clear eyes. "I don't need you to make it right. What I need is for you to understand the truth about what you did to me, the truth about what I lost because of your choices." Henry looked up at me then, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and guilt. "I know," he whispered. "I know." I could feel the crowd behind me, their eyes still on us, waiting for more, waiting for what would happen next. But I wasn't ready to give them that, not yet. Instead, I turned back to Henry, my voice steady. "I never wanted to hurt you, Clara," he said again, his voice quiet, almost pleading. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting you. But I see now that I was wrong. I should have chosen you. I should have fought for us." The room was quiet now. The murmurs had stopped. All eyes were on us. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the girl who had been left behind. I didn't feel like the victim of some cruel game. I felt like the woman I had become, the woman who had survived, who had learned, who had grown stronger in the face of betrayal. And as I looked around the room, I saw something else, something I hadn't expected. There were people in the crowd who understood. They understood what it felt like to be betrayed, to be hurt, to be left behind. And they were silently nodding, silently acknowledging that the truth was powerful. Henry stepped back, giving me space to speak. The mayor, who had been standing off to the side, cleared his throat, as if he was unsure how to proceed. But the moment had already passed. The truth had been spoken. There was nothing more to say. I walked off the stage, my heart lighter than it had been in years. I didn't look back at Henry. I didn't need to. He had already made his choices, and so had I. Later that evening, as I sat alone in my kitchen, the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something in my gut told me it was important. I picked up the receiver, my fingers trembling slightly. "Clara?" The voice on the other end was familiar, but it took me a moment to place it. It was Lena, Henry's niece. "Clara, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice shaky. "There's something you need to know, something about Henry." My stomach twisted. What could it be? What more could there be to this story? "What is it, Lena?" I asked, my voice steady but filled with curiosity. There was a pause on the other end. "I think you should hear it from me," she said softly, "but you might not like to hear it." I felt a pang of anxiety. "What is it?" I asked again, my tone firm. "Just tell me." There was a pause on the other end. "I think you should come over," she said, her voice filled with urgency. "I don't want to say too much over the phone, but this is important." I didn't hesitate. "I'll be there soon." As I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change, something bigger than what had already happened, something I wasn't ready for. I had no idea what Lena was going to tell me, but I knew one thing for sure. The truth was far from over. I arrived at Lena's house just as the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in soft pinks and purples, and there was a chill in the air. I could feel it creeping into my bones, the same unease I had felt when I first picked up the phone. I wasn't sure what Lena needed to tell me, but I knew one thing. It was going to change everything. When I knocked on her door, it swung open almost immediately, as if she had been waiting. Lena stood in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes wide with something I couldn't quite place. Fear, maybe. Her usual calm demeanor was gone. "Clara, come in," she said softly, stepping aside to let me pass. "I'm glad you came." I followed her into the small living room where the warm light from a single lamp flickered against the walls. It was cozy in here, but the tension in the air was palpable. I could feel my heart rate picking up. She motioned for me to sit on the couch, and I did, my hands resting in my lap, my mind racing with questions. "I don't really know how to start," Lena said, her voice trembling. She sat down across from me, her hands clasped tightly together. "But there's something I need to tell you, something I've never told anyone before." I leaned forward slightly, my curiosity piqued. "What is it, Lena? What's going on?" She took a deep breath, her eyes glancing down at the floor as if she was trying to gather her thoughts. "This is about my Uncle Henry," she said quietly. "I know you've heard the stories, and I know you've been hurt by him, but there's something you don't know, something I found out not too long ago." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Lena hesitated, as though deciding whether she should tell me. Finally, she spoke, her words slow and careful. "Clara, my Uncle Henry never wanted to hurt you. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but it's the truth. What happened between you, it wasn't entirely his fault." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? Of course it was his fault. He made a promise to me and he broke it." Lena nodded, her eyes filled with sorrow I couldn't fully understand. "I know, Clara, I know, but there was more going on behind the scenes, something I didn't know until recently." I leaned forward, the weight of her words sinking in. "What are you saying, Lena? What else is there?" She bit her lip and looked away for a moment, as though gathering the courage to continue. "You see, Henry wasn't just influenced by his own fears. There was pressure from his family, from his parents. They didn't approve of you, Clara. They didn't think you were right for him." I felt a sharp sting in my chest. "What are you talking about? His family didn't think I was good enough?" I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Lena nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, they were afraid of the scandal. They said if Henry married you, it would ruin his reputation. They were scared he'd lose his career, his place in society. They said it would destroy everything he worked for." My mind reeled as I processed her words. All these years I had blamed Henry. I had thought that Henry had made the choice to leave me because I wasn't enough, because I wasn't worthy of his love. But now Lena was telling me that it wasn't just his choice, it wasn't just his fear that had driven him to break his promise. It was his family. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" Lena looked at me, her eyes full of regret. "I didn't know until recently. After my uncle left Willowbrook, I started looking through some old things in his house, letters, documents, old photographs. I found out that his family had a lot of influence on his decisions. They controlled so much of his life." My mind was spinning. "So you're telling me that Henry didn't have the courage to choose me because his family made him believe it would ruin him? That's why he married Eleanor?" Lena nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes. Then when he tried to fight for you, they threatened him. They told him that if he chose you, they would destroy everything he worked for. He was young, Clara. He didn't know how to fight them. He was afraid of losing everything." I sat back, feeling as though the ground had been pulled from under my feet. All this time, I had believed Henry was the one who had walked away.
I thought he had chosen comfort over love. But now Lena was telling me something else entirely, that Henry had been trapped, caught between the woman he loved and the family that controlled him. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. "All these years I blamed Henry. I thought he didn't care. I thought he just wanted to use me as a stepping stone for his career." Lena reached across the table, her hand resting gently on mine. "I know it's hard, Clara. I know it changes everything. But my uncle never stopped caring about you. He never forgot you." I shook my head, still processing everything she had told me. "I don't know if I can forgive him, Lena. I've spent too many years living with the hurt. I don't know if I can trust him again." Lena squeezed my hand. "I understand, but sometimes the truth isn't just about forgiveness, it's about understanding, and now you understand the truth about what happened." I nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. I had lived so long with anger and resentment. I had carried the burden of Henry's broken promise for so many years. But now, as I sat in this room with Lena, I realized that everything I had believed about Henry and his choices was only part of the story. There was so much more to it. "I need time," I said finally, looking up at Lena. "I need time to process this, but thank you for telling me. I don't know what this means yet, but I'm glad I know the truth." Lena smiled softly, her eyes filled with understanding. "Take all the time you need, Clara, but know this. My uncle has spent his life regretting the choices he made. He never wanted to hurt you. He just didn't know how to fight for what mattered." I stood up slowly, feeling a strange sense of relief mixed with uncertainty. "I'll think about what you've told me, Lena, but I need some time alone." She nodded, standing up with me. "Of course. Take care of yourself, Clara, and remember, you're not alone in this. You never were." As I walked out of Lena's house and back into the cool night air, I felt a strange sense of peace. The truth had come to light, and while it didn't erase the pain, it allowed me to see things in a new way. Henry's choices, his fears, his regrets, they were all part of a story much bigger than I had understood. And now, as I moved forward, I had to decide what that story meant for me.
The days after my conversation with Lena were filled with a strange kind of stillness. The truth had settled in, but I wasn't sure where to go from here. My mind kept drifting back to Henry, back to the man I had once thought I knew so well, the man who had promised me a future, then shattered that future when he made choices based on fear and his family's control. I had never expected to hear the truth the way Lena had told it. I had always thought that Henry's decision to leave me had been driven by his own desires, his ambition, his need for status. But now, hearing that his family had manipulated him, trapped him in their expectations, it changed everything. It was as though the foundation of my anger and resentment had cracked, and I was left standing on uneven ground. I spent a lot of time in the garden those days. It was where I felt most at peace, surrounded by the quiet rhythm of nature. I would water the flowers, pull weeds, and sometimes, when the silence became too heavy, I would let my mind wander, letting it float between memories of the past and the new truth I had been given. One afternoon, as I was pruning a rose bush near the fence, I saw a familiar figure walking down the road. I recognized him immediately, Henry. My heart tightened in my chest. It wasn't the first time I had seen him since our confrontation in the community hall, but something about the way he walked down the street, slow, deliberate, made my pulse race. I stood there, frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. He was coming toward my house, and this time I didn't know what he wanted. I put the pruning shears down and wiped my hands on my gardening apron before stepping out from behind the trellis. I watched him as he approached, his steps heavy, as though he were carrying a burden far too great to bear. When he reached the gate, he paused for a moment, his eyes meeting mine. There was a weariness in his face, something deeper than regret. It was almost as if he had come to terms with something he had been avoiding for years. "Clara," he said softly, his voice hoarse, "can we talk?" I nodded, motioning for him to come inside. He stepped through the gate, and I led him to the porch, the place where so many conversations had taken place. But this time, everything felt different. It wasn't the porch of our past, the place where he had once promised me the future. It was a place of uncertainty, a place where we would have to face the truth, not just about him, but about me as well. We both sat in the rocking chairs, the quiet evening air settling around us like a blanket. The sun was low in the sky, casting a golden hue over everything, but the silence between us felt heavy. "You've been through a lot, Henry," began, his voice trembling slightly, "and I know that nothing I say can change the past, but I need you to understand something. I've spent my whole life running from the truth, from the fear of what my family would think, from the fear of losing everything I thought mattered." I didn't respond right away. I just looked at him, waiting for him to continue. His words felt empty, almost rehearsed, but still there was something in his eyes, of vulnerability that made me listen. "I know I hurt you, Clara," he said, his voice breaking. "I can't change that. I can't undo the damage I did. But I need you to know that I never stopped caring about you. I never stopped thinking about you, and I never stopped regretting the promise I broke." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. His words were familiar. They were the same words he had said to me all those years ago when he first told me he would come back for me. But this time, they felt different. They felt like words spoken out of desperation, not love. "You've been telling me this for years, Henry," I said quietly. "You've been telling me that you regret it, but what I need to know now is this. Why did you come back? Why now, after all these years?" He hesitated, looking down at his hands. "I don't know," he admitted. "I guess I thought if I could come back and make things right, I could fix it, fix what I broke. But when I came to see you the other day, when I stood in front of you and saw the woman you've become, I realized something. I realized that I can't fix this. I can't undo what I did to you. All I can do is apologize, and I need you to know that I'm sorry, Clara. I'm so, so sorry." The weight of his words settled on me, but I didn't feel the anger that I thought I would. I didn't feel the rage that had burned so hot for so many years. Instead, I felt a deep, quiet sadness. "Henry," I said, my voice steady, "I've spent so many years waiting for you to come back, waiting for you to fix everything. But I've realized something too. I can't keep living in the past. I can't keep holding on to a promise that was never meant to be kept." He looked up at me then, his eyes filled with confusion. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that it's time for both of us to move on," I said softly. "I'm saying that I can't keep waiting for something that will never come. You made your choice, Henry. You chose comfort over love. You chose fear over courage, and I can't change that. I can't keep living in the shadow of that decision." He sat there, silent, his eyes distant. I could tell he was processing what I was saying, but I wasn't sure he fully understood. After all, how could he? How could anyone understand what it was like to live in the quiet aftermath of a broken promise? I stood up slowly, my hands trembling slightly as I reached for the door handle. "I think it's time for you to go, Henry. We've both said what we needed to say. Now it's time to leave the past where it belongs, behind us." He didn't try to stop me. He didn't argue. He just stood up, his shoulders slumped, his face shadowed by regret.
As he walked away from my house, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. The finality of the moment, the realization that I was no longer waiting for him to fix everything, felt like the first step towards freedom. Henry Mason had been a part of my story for so long, but now, as I watched him disappear into the distance, I knew that my story was mine alone, and it was time to start writing the next chapter.
After Henry left, I stood at the door for a long time, watching him walk away down the quiet road. I didn't chase him. I didn't ask him to stay or to explain himself any further. I had asked him to face the truth, and he had. That was all I could do. The breeze picked up, rustling the leaves in the trees. It was peaceful, the kind of peace that only comes after a storm has passed. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel angry. I just felt empty, in the way that only years of waiting and hoping for something to change can leave you feeling. I went back inside the house, my mind still spinning with the weight of our conversation. I couldn't help but replay every word Henry had said, every confession he had made. But as the day wore on, I realized that the truth didn't really change anything. I couldn't erase the years of disappointment. I couldn't undo the hurt. And maybe that was the hardest part of all. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the old wooden surface. My hands rested on the worn, familiar wood. The silence in the room was deafening. I hadn't realized how loud the noise of my own thoughts had been until it all suddenly quieted. That evening, I sat outside on the porch again, the same spot where Henry had stood just hours before. The air was cool now, and the sky was streaked with the last light of the sunset. It was beautiful, but it didn't feel like mine. Not yet. I picked up my journal, the one I'd kept for years, and opened to a blank page. I needed to write. I needed to make sense of everything that had happened. I took the pen in my hand and stared at the page, trying to find the right words. For so long, I had defined myself by Henry's promises. I had built my entire identity around the hope that one day he would come back, that we would be together, that the life I had imagined in my youth would finally be realized. But now I knew the truth. That life, if it had ever existed, was gone. I took a deep breath, my pen poised above the paper. I wasn't going to write about Henry anymore. I wasn't going to write about the past. I was going to write about the future, my future. The pen moved across the page, slowly at first, then with more confidence. I didn't know where this new path would lead, but I knew I was ready to find out. I spent the rest of the evening writing, filling the pages with thoughts and feelings I hadn't known how to express. I wrote about the woman I had become, stronger, wiser, and free. Free from the burden of waiting, free from the lie I had lived for so many years. The next day, I woke up with a sense of clarity. It was as if a weight had been lifted from my chest. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't holding on to the past. I was moving forward, one step at a time. Spent the morning cleaning out my house, organizing things I hadn't touched in years. There were old boxes of letters, photographs, and mementos from my childhood. Things I had kept for so long, thinking they were important, thinking they were tied to who I used to be. But today, I realized they weren't who I was anymore. They were just remnants of a past I had outgrown. As I sorted through everything, I came across something that stopped me in my tracks, an old letter from my mother. I hadn't seen it in years.
I unfolded the fragile paper and began to read. My dear Clara, I know you're afraid. I know you wonder if you'll ever find the strength to let go of the past. But I want you to remember this. Life is full of second chances, and no matter what happens, you have the power to create the future you want. You are not defined by anyone but yourself. Tears stung my eyes as I read the words. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear them. My mother had passed away years ago, but in that moment, I felt her presence like she was sitting beside me, guiding me through the hardest decision of my life. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a box to keep. It was a reminder of the woman I had once been, a woman full of hope and dreams. And it was a reminder of the woman I had become, a woman who had learned to let go, to move forward, and to forgive herself. That afternoon, I received a call from Lena. I hadn't spoken to her since the night she told me the truth about Henry and his family. When I saw her name on the caller ID, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. She had been the one to give me the missing piece of the puzzle. She had given me the truth, and for that, I would always be grateful. Clara, how are you? Lena asked when I picked up the phone. I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. I smiled softly. I'm doing better, Lena. I've been writing, taking some time for myself, and I've realized something important. What's that? She asked, her voice filled with curiosity. I'm not the girl I used to be, I said, my voice steady. I'm not the girl who waited for someone else to choose her. I'm the woman who chooses herself now. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear Lena breathing softly, as if taking in my words. That's good, Clara, she said, her voice warm with approval. That's exactly what you need to do. You've always been stronger than you knew. I know now, I said, my heart lighter than it had been in years. I've spent so much time blaming Henry, blaming myself, but now I see that the only person I need to answer to is me. Lena's voice softened. You've got this, Clara. You've always had it in you. After we hung up, I stood by the window, looking out at the horizon. The sun was beginning to set again, casting a golden light across the land. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something new, something real, and I wasn't afraid. The days that followed were peaceful in a way I hadn't known in years. The storm had passed, and now there was a quiet calm that enveloped everything. I spent my time doing what I had always loved, reading, writing, tending to my garden. I found solace in the little things, the small moments that reminded me of who I had always been and who I was becoming. Henry never returned after that day on the porch. The finality of it didn't sting anymore. It had taken me a long time to understand, but I knew now that we were both victims of the circumstances we had found ourselves in. And while I could never forget the pain of waiting, I no longer let it define me. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into the scholarship program I had created. The girls who came to Willowbrook to apply for the program were full of hope, full of dreams of a future they could shape for themselves. As I watched them, I realized something important. My life wasn't just about what had been taken from me. It was about what I had built, what I was continuing to build. The program grew quickly, with each new application reminding me of the power of second chances. The girls who received scholarships had no idea what their future would look like, just like I hadn't known when I was their age. But I was determined to give them what I had never received, an opportunity to rise above the expectations of others, to create a future they could be proud of.
One afternoon, Lena stopped by the house again. She was smiling, a bright, wide smile that told me everything I needed to know before she even spoke. "I got in," she said, her voice full of excitement. "I'm going to college, Clara. I'm going to study social work, just like I always wanted." I felt my heart swell with pride. "I knew you would," I said softly. "You're going to do amazing things, Lena." She sat down beside me, looking out at the garden, her face full of wonder. "You've helped so many of us, Clara. You've given us the chance to do something more with our lives. You've changed the world in ways you don't even realize." I smiled, my heart full. "I didn't do it alone, Lena. We're all in this together." And it was true. Everything I had built, everything I had worked for had been for a purpose. The people I had helped, the girls I had supported, they were the true legacy of what had happened. Not the past, not Henry, but the future I had helped create for others. As Lena left, I felt the weight of the years lifting off my shoulders. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer had the power to control me. I had taken the broken pieces and turned them into something beautiful. And as I sat on the porch that evening, the sun setting behind me, I realized that I was finally free. Free from the waiting, free from the hurt, free from the promises that were never kept. I had created my own future, one that was mine and mine alone. Thank you for listening to Clara's story. If you enjoyed this journey of self-discovery, love, and redemption, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more powerful fictional stories. Share this with someone who might need a little reminder that it's never too late to take control of their own destiny. Let us know in the comments what part of Clara's journey resonated with you the most, and if you believe that true strength lies in learning to forgive not just others, but ourselves. Stay tuned for more heartfelt stories, and remember, sometimes the greatest story we can live is the one we create ourselves.